So I want to read a few short chapters, short sections, and then open it up to discussion. And I'm wondering, in this group of people, how many of you have family members that came to this country, like after the Civil War, say? Just, and others perhaps before the Civil War. So you can imagine what it might have been like. So this is the beginning, and the character Irma is living with her father, with her brother Carlo, with her aunt Carmela, in a very small house, one room. It was stone. There's been some hunger years, and her mother has what probably is some kind of tuberculosis, and she's dying. On the morning of her last day, my mother whispered, "Irma, don't die with strangers." "I won't, Mama." The soft fog of our breath hovered over the bed. Neighbors filled our room, standing against the walls, the women crying softly. When Father Anselmo closed my mother's eyes, 3 women silently came forward to wash and dress her. Walking home after the funeral, my father cleared his throat and said, "Irma, you must cook and clean for me now, as Rosa did." "Yes, Papa." "And you will sing her songs and wear her clothes. You will do this for respect. You are an Opie woman now." Barely 16, I felt as old and shabby as my mother's brown shawl, melting into Opie and the place carved out for me. As I knew my own plain face in our tin mirror, I knew each stone in the 4 walls and floor of our house. I knew the narrow streets draped across the mountain crest, like threads for lacework never finished, unraveling into shepherd's trails. These threads caught and held me like a web. I knew which families had carved wooden doors and which had rough-nailed planks. I knew the voices and shapes of our people. By the sound of their footsteps, I knew which of them walked behind me. I knew the old women's coughs, the old men's stories, the good husbands, and those who came home stinking drunk from wine on market day. I knew why the mayor's wife covered her bruises with a fine silk shawl. In a tapestry of Opie, you'd see me in the shade of the olive trees with my dull brown hair and my face turned away. Opie was mine, but after my mother died, I grew anxious. If I didn't wed soon, how could I live? Because it was not for love that poor girls sought husbands. We yearned for daily bread and a tight roof, firewood in winter, and with luck, a man who wouldn't beat us, who would talk with us in the long evenings and comfort us when children died. We hoped, above all, for a man who was healthy and did not drink, who worked each day and helped us bear the hunger years. So that's what she wants. It's not that much. She's a needleworker, she's a skilled needleworker, but when Opie cannot satisfy those simple demands, and when the choice is put to her to become a sexual object of her father or a very inappropriate man, when she cannot anymore tolerate that sense of herself, she leaves and comes to America. Now, she takes a boat, and I did a lot of research on the boats coming over, and the end of that is it was really rough. Slowly through the 1900s, the government got more and more involved and started to demand more safety from the ship owners, more sanitation, more time on deck. But at this time, sort of the time of the robber barons, the boat owners were not exactly treating the steerage like slave passengers, but as close as they could get. So she's just left Gibraltar. She has formed a relationship with a woman named Teresa, who's traveling with her little daughter Gabriela, and they're hoping that her husband is there in New York, as he promised, and also 2 Syrian women who are traveling together, presenting themselves as sisters, but they're probably not. So there's a storm. "Everyone on their beds," the stewards ordered, "now." The ship dipped wildly, hurtling small children off their feet. Dazed men staggered back from card games in the stairwells, groping from post to post, as swinging lanterns scraped streaks of light across their faces. Shrieks laced the howling wind, first of children, and soon of women and men. Some cried the ship was witched. Many prayed. I saw men cover their heads with shawls and chant, rocking steadily. They're rocking, the rocking ship, and everywhere the clicking rosaries like ravenous mice made me dizzy. I closed my eyes as matrons careened down the aisles, ordering children to tie small children to posts. Private chamber pots tumbled across the room. A flying bucket caught a woman full in the face. She fainted and her husband cried for a doctor. "He can't come," a steward shouted. I had lived through mountain storms, but in a stone house rooted in the earth with my own people near me. "Stay on your berths," the matron shouted. The ship pitched, yanking a babe from the mother's arms and hurtling him against a post, screaming. Jordana and Milenka climbed down to us, announcing, "Take storm together." We passed the night with our arms linked around Gabriela, who whimpered herself to sleep. I say night, but faint ship spells under the screeching wind and creaking timbers were all that signaled night or day. "Holy Mother of God," I repeated, gripping my rosary, too lightheaded to work the beads, "be with us now." Sickness filled me top to toe. Teresa held a bowl for my vomit until a sudden lurch tore it from her hands, soaking us all. With each wave crashing full against the ship, I thought, this one breaks her. Now seawater swallows us, like the avalanche that took a village near Opie, sweeping out trees, houses, men, and sheep. A bag weakly tied broke free and slid across the floor, spilling clothes, cups, a clock, and Bible. The air throbbed with retching, first here and there, then in waves across the dormitory. I gripped our galloping bed. Words rattled in my head like marbles in a cup. "Lord, I'm dying." Then, "Lord, let me die, let me die." For an instant the ship held steady, the wind dropped, then raged again after the mocking calm. I'm dead, I thought wildly, dead among strangers like my great-grandfather in Russia. This is hell. No flames, only storm without end. We were the damned, battered for our sins. Sailors' feet pounded overhead, whistle blasts. It's finished, we sink, the ocean takes us. Now at last the peace of death, but still we toss on mountain waves. I closed my eyes and somehow slept, tangled and grasping for air under a vast black cloak. I dreamed a pale green light spread like oil over the rocking waves. The Servia was broken away and I alone was left, clinging to my bed at sea. Carlo, that's a brother, floated past, astride a piston. Laughing, he reached for me. A faceless shadow man appeared on a battered raft. "Here's my sail," he said, hoisting Carlo's limp and gauzy body. "Come, Irma, there's room for you." Someone shook me and I saw Jordana's hovering face, felt a cup at my lips, woke and slept again. Someone wet my brow. I tasted warm tea and struggled to sit. Jordana and Milenka must have returned to their berths. From whispering and laughter, paper slaps, and creaking wood above us, I gathered they were playing the fast, complex card game that they swore only Serbs could learn. Near me, Gabriela slept, arms and legs sprayed out like a rag doll. Teresa worked around us, rolling soiled linens together and feeling through bags for clean clothes. Then a new sound came slowly through what ship's bells told us was night. My sewing box was not a span away, but I could not bend to reach it. Perhaps the Lord will take both mother and babe, I thought, drifting back to sleep. Minutes later, Teresa shook me awake to a shrill cry that filled the room now, triumphant and imperious. "I'm here! Attend me!" "A healthy girl!" women shouted. Some beat their cups together. Men cheered weakly and children shouted, some excited, some confused. "Where did she come from?" a little boy demanded. "Did the storm bring her?" "Lord be praised," Teresa whispered. The Serb sang a birthing song, and Teresa helped me stand. From all over the rolling room, we made our way to Angela's bed, grasping posts to keep from falling, as the babe's sharp wails rose over the wind. "I'll call her Marina." the mother said as she nursed the swaddled, red-faced babe, because she outcried the storm. Someone laughed, then others, until we were all holding our still aching bellies, laughing and crying in pain. She makes it to America, first to Cleveland, where she gets swept up into a workhouse, and then to Chicago. This was a time before the great waves of immigration. So later, not that much later, maybe 10 years later, little communities all over Europe would be reading letters sent from home. There would be agents that were sent out from various states that wanted immigrants to Eastern Europe, but also to Scandinavia, to Southern Europe, and they would try to recruit people to come to North Dakota, where the weather was so beautiful, or Iowa because of the land, or you must come to Kansas. And they would, of course, try to get groups of people coming over. But there was generally a strong sense of, come and we'll take care of you. But this was not like that. In fact, when she left, her thought, because her brother Carlo had talked about going to Cleveland, that she would go to Cleveland and there would be a church. Why should there be more than one church? And she would talk to the priest, and the priest would tell her where her brother Carlo was. So it doesn't take her long when she gets to Cleveland to realize that it's not going to be like that, and not going to be that hard to find Carlo. In fact, she doesn't. She's in Cleveland, and one thing I noticed when I was living in America, in Italy, is that while you would think that you would sort of naturally bond with people from your own country, when I was there, it wasn't that any other American would be knowing or missing my America. They would be missing their America. So that in the end, what you shared was sort of your own sense of being alone. So she's actually teaching English now. She doesn't know English that well, but she knows it a lot better than some immigrants. And there's also a reference to a town in called Brazigovo, which you know is in the center of Bulgaria. And that's important to us because that's where we first met our daughter, Amelia. Perhaps my parents were right. My students were right. I was becoming American. Change came quickly in those years in Chicago. The land itself was changing. The city was squeezing up around the lake and pressing into the rich black fields to the south. Day and night, immigrants poured out of the train stations and lake ports. The city ground away our foreignness as we milled past one another in shops, parks, and clattering streets. In their first month, it was easy to pick out Swedes, Irish, Italians, Germans, Slovenians, Hungarians, Bulgarians, and Russian Jews who clustered around Maxwell Street. But in the tenements, factory blocks, and work crews swarming around the new buildings that sprouted everywhere, the old country ways melted like fruit ice in summer. The home songs remained. Hurrying through the streets, I heard strips of songs in a dozen languages, refrains torn to shreds by harness bells, street calls, and a steady rain of hammering. Under our breaths, we sang in dialect from our villages, drenching old wells of memory, but we sang alone. When Mrs. Gustafson hired a Sicilian carpenter, I understood nothing of his sweet haunting lament, and he had never heard my Opie songs. Once that summer, I saw two men catch each other's tunes across a crowded streetcar. They were Bulgarians, someone said, as they pushed toward each other, heedless as lovers. From my village, Brazigovo, one of them shouted to us all in English as they beat each other on the back, weeping and scrambling off at the next stop, arm in arm. Women on the streetcar smoothed the folds of their skirts, and men tugged at leather hand straps. Where were our people from our villages who knew our songs?